Nintendo is just ripping people off. Nintendo is just ripping people off. Nintendo is just ripping people off.
Oh yeah, just like when Dreamcast guy sold his PS5 Slim to his girlfriend for $500. Of course, Dreamcast guy would know about ripping people off. I mean, look no further than what he did to his own girlfriend.
I don't know a more coy way to say this, but we're going to talk about the drama because one of the biggest controversies about the Nintendo Switch 2, besides the buy it physical, the fact that when you bought an actual Nintendo Switch game for the Switch 1, the entire data was on the cart. 99% of them, you get it. This thing, well, it may require updates and stuff if there's some bug fixes and stuff.
Yeah, but I told you guys that gaming was pushing for a digital-only future, and I might have an actual explanation as to why this is going on with the Nintendo Switch 2.
You could buy this, and with no internet connection, I can pop this directly into my Switch and beat the entire game. In fact, it doesn't even need to install a lot of times. It literally, there were a couple games that people didn't like, but they did exist, that had this big banner
and if you notice, a lot of those games were the ones that they didn't want to compress, which I also believe that that's the problem with the Switch 2, is the fact that they're trying to give you guys the best versions of what the Switch 2 is capable of, because you guys have to understand, the reason as to why a lot of the Switch 1 counterparts didn't look as good as its competitors has more to do with the fact that they were compressing these games just so they can fit on the Switch. Now that you have the Switch 2 out, they don't necessarily have to do that with the game keycard. You download 60, 80 gigabyte of that space through your SD card, micro espresso SD card on your Switch 2, and then you play the games that way without. That's why y'all like, oh wow, these versions look just as good as they do on PlayStation 5 and Xbox, because they didn't have to go back, compress the game, make the game look worse, and instead they could just use the hardware of the Switch 2 to push the game to the boundaries that they want to.
That says, hey, this requires an internet download. This is what people call a game key. It allows you to play the game, but all the storage, all the data is being downloaded off the internet. At this point, you might as well.
Well, it's just like PlayStation. It's just like Xbox. I mean, didn't you say you go as far to buy Indiana Jones physically for your PS5? And that game is not on the disc as well as any other physical copy that Xbox decides to make. So what is the point of you people complaining about this? Like, I get it. This is very anti-consumer. But I find it so funny that now all of a sudden you guys want to come out and talk about this, even though you guys have accepted this for years. And now all of a sudden that Nintendo's doing it. Oh, it's a problem. I'm not saying that they should. You know, they were like you said, the last bashes of hope that we had in this gaming community in regards to physical media, and look at what they're doing. But that just shows you that the games that they're trying to push on cartridge, they don't want to compress them anymore. It is what it is, bro. You expect a company to put 100 gigabyte of storage in a cartridge? You know how expensive that would be? So they're like, you know what? Make it a game key card, have everybody download it online, no different than what you do with your PS5 and Series X by getting the data from the server, and there you go, and having access to the game. That's why the Switch, for some, well, the Switch 2, for some third-party games look just as good as the Xbox Series S or the PS5 that you guys have been comparing to. Because you're like, you know why? Because they didn't have to compromise. They didn't have to go through the game and try to get it to fit on this little 16 to 32 gigabyte cartridge. That's the reason as to why the Switch 1 had a lot of bad running and bad performing games.
Digitally, because the physical cart doesn't do a damn thing. Well, Nintendo just opened up.
I mean, you can still tweet it.
The pre-orders in other regions of the world for the Nintendo Switch 2, and they admitted that pretty much every single Nintendo Switch 2 game isn't real. None of them.
They didn't say that because Nintendo hasn't. Hold on. What are you saying? Because Nintendo didn't come out and do that for their games. What are you talking about? This has more to do with the third party.
Them are actually on the cart. The carts themselves are all empty. And people are very, very mad. Even big collectors, people are talking about the fact that
maybe y'all need to stop collecting and maybe y'all should start playing games, man. Like I said, I get it. PC gamers went through the same thing. I told you guys that we was going to head, GameStop with another W, towards a digital-only future. And now you guys are starting to see that, even with Nintendo themselves.
Going to buy a Nintendo Switch 2. I'm even seeing a ton of people saying that this defeats the purpose of even having a cartridge slot. But
not necessarily, considering that it's still backwards compatible with the Switch 1 games. Like, you see what I mean, man? Like, you guys want to keep going on this hate mongering, and I get it. I get it. The Nintendo Switch 2 is trending. It's the most popular thing right now, even though you guys still went out there and pre-ordered the damn thing. I decided not to because honestly, it's not really worth my money. But still, it goes as far to show you that you people ain't nothing but a bunch of hypocrites.
Okay, let's take a look at a lot of angry reactions. One of the things people would basically collect the Nintendo Switch for is that when you get an Xbox game, the disc is empty. I mean,
that's not true. Now, for the games that Microsoft make, yes, but there's a few games that are from third party that I have, and I've tried these games offline, and it still worked on my Xbox. See, but the problem is with that is that your system is actually worse because you guess what? Once your disk drive goes, you can't replace it because you got to synchronize it online. So at the end of the day, it's still DRM. Who's to say that these disk drives are going to last forever? Now, I think the concerns that we should be talking about as to why is that puzzle game not on the cartridge? Now, that's crazy in my opinion. Sonic Shadow Generations, how is that not on the cartridge? And what's even more funny, for the Switch 1 version of the game, it is. But the Switch 2 version is not. Same thing with Suikoden. I have that. I literally have that game for Switch 1, and that's on the cartridge, but the Switch 2 version ain't. Now that's why I'm at the call cap on. And then you got this other game. What is this? This little soccer game, which I don't understand how they couldn't fit that on the cartridge. Bravely Default. There's a lot of games they could have fit in these cartridges, but I guess the third party decided not to. Maybe Daemon X Machina, maybe that's a little different. Maybe they're pushing boundaries, but really, the games that dropped out on Switch 1 physically that are actually on the cartridge are not on the cartridge on the Switch 2 version? Like, that's crazy to me, but maybe this also explains that the Switch 2 will get far superior versions now. That's probably the whole idea. They don't have to compress the game, get it to work with the limited hardware. They can push the Switch 2's hardware to its best of its capabilities. Do you get what I'm saying? Without having to compress. Now, it's still a bad thing because I don't understand how you got Sonic Shadow Generations on the Switch 1 cartridge, but now all of a sudden, I don't know the gigabyte space, but all I'm saying that this is kind of crazy.
None of the data is actually on the disc. You pop the disc in and it downloads it. Same with PlayStation 5. There's a couple PS5
Now, this
games
is just pure laziness
that are complete, but 95% they're not actually in the box. And that does just for your shelf to point at.
Well, there you go. PlayStation's doing the same thing like you just admitted. So why are we coming at Nintendo like this?
Over, right? Well, this thing, Switch 2 pre-orders have gone up in Japan for a few hours, revealing that all physical third-party games so far, except for Cyberpunk 2077, are not Nintendo Switch 2 editions. They're shipping with game key cards, meaning that literally there's nothing on it. This is $80 games. In some cases, if you want to get the Switch 2 edition of like Zelda, that thing, if you want the DLC, that's $90. That means that it's actually useless. How can you...
I mean, you can still trade them. I mean, you can still, like I said, it's no different than what you're doing with Xbox Series X and PS5 games now, but it also shows you that there's no point for physical media. I mean, look at it. I mean, they even got, look at this, a Tetris game. Are you serious? Y'all couldn't fit that on a cartridge? Sonic Shadow Generations. Now, mind you, I don't know the gigabyte space, but like I said, maybe it far exceeds 32 gigabytes, or maybe how much whatever Sega's trying to put on the cartridge. But it's like, it's crazy because y'all did it for the Switch 1. Same thing with Suikoden. So now I'm starting to think that, man, maybe Limited Run might actually have a problem with putting games on the Switch 2. Maybe Nintendo did this for a good reason.
Charge. How can you act like this is the next generation of Nintendo if you don't even care about putting something on it? Now,
those are not Nintendo games, though. I mean, if you notice, a lot of those are third party.
And when they go up, I do have a feeling that early on, I think there will be a big push for pre-orders. I
don't think I want to get one. I mean, considering, like I said, there's a lot of third party games dropping on the Switch 2. And I know people could say, well, just avoid them. You don't have to buy them. But at the end of the day, I did enjoy some of my third-party games on my Switch 1. This is pretty bad news, man. Nintendo Prime is probably out here defending. It's no different than how it is on PlayStation 5, though. I mean, this is what you Nintendo dudes advocating for. I mean, that's crazy, man. You got Bravely Default, a 3DS game that was actually on the cartridge. You had Suikoden. Like, see, what I'm saying, like, I mean, Daemon X Machina, all that Capcom game. I'm like, okay, I don't know. Maybe they didn't want to fit it on a 64 gigabyte cartridge. But come on, man. The games that dropped physically on the Switch 1, but yet the Switch 2 version is not on the cartridge is very disingenuous in my honest opinion. You know what I mean? Hopefully Nintendo fans can be like, yeah, GameStop, I see where you're coming from, because Suikoden and Sonic Shadow Generations is on the cartridge physically on the Nintendo Switch 1. But when we talk about Nintendo Switch 2, they're no longer on the cartridge. Now all of a sudden it's a game key card. Yeah, I don't like that. That to me is very messed up.
And I could be just drinking the internet Kool-Aid here. The dude cares not just about the games, he cares about collecting. I've been in this room. The guy has pretty much every Nintendo Switch game you could possibly imagine. If this guy is saying, okay, this is super disappointing, I was planning on buying half of these. Was planning. Meaning that at this point, even he, as a collector, as a guy who could write it up.
Yeah, but what about as a gamer? You know, what about as a person that's going to sit here and actually enjoy these games for what they are?
Texas is basically like, okay, I'm not buying a bunch of empty boxes with the code inside. I don't care how fancy the box art is. I don't care if it comes with an instruction manual. There's no point to buy all these empty boxes, especially as I trip over their own feet in order to make the most money profitable. They don't care if it screws over their fans. They don't care if it makes you mad.
Of course, you know, a multi-billion-dollar company actually caring about their fans. You really think Nintendo cares, man? And like I said, man, for people saying it's not Nintendo's fault, yes, it is. Because Nintendo could be sitting there saying, yo, Sega, what are you doing? You had Sonic Shadow Generations on the Switch 1 on the cartridge. Why are you putting it on a game key card? You're being cheap, huh, Sega? Are you being cheap? Like, this is crazy, man. This is by far one of the worst Nintendo consoles that I've ever seen in regards to physical media, man. And like I said, man, this is going to make people want to buy the Steam Deck instead, because when you got games like Hogwarts Legacy and the same games that you're probably seeing here, and you probably can get them for way cheaper than $60 to $70 to $80. Do you get what I'm saying? I mean, the Switch 2 just really lost the customer here, man.
As long as that money shows up, they're going to keep just shoving.
Well, guess what? Everybody pre-ordered and got one.
These crappy deals in your face. Screw these. So sad to see the successor of the Switch, which was a bastion for physical games, shockingly being the most anti-physical platform. This is the last tweet I have here, and it's the one that... This is why I'm not getting the Nintendo Switch 2.
Yeah, right. Is that why it sold out in pre-orders, you hypocrites?
You gotta be effing kidding me. What's the point of making a physical box if the game is not even in there, it's just a key? I think that Nintendo has...
You know, PC gamers are laughing at y'all, man. Y'all really thought Nintendo wasn't going to do this, and I told you guys that digital is the future of gaming. GameStop has been yet again right. I'm right all the time when it comes to these things, bro. Y'all just didn't want to see it. Y'all thought that Nintendo really cared about its consumer base. And guess what? You could blame third party all you want, but as far as I'm concerned, the games was far better on Switch 1, even though they had to compromise even more. Now, I'm starting to think this has more to do with the storage capacity of these games and why they're putting these games on as game key cards, because they probably don't want to put the game on a 32 or a 64 gigabyte cartridge. Maybe they don't want to, you know what I'm saying? They don't want to do that. They're like, nah, man, that takes too much time and resources. We might as well just make it as a license key at this point.
They've gotten too big for their britches. It's something other people have reported on. I'm not, redefining the wheel, coming up with that same analysis, but it does feel like, in general, with every console generation especially, if you have overwhelming success, if you sell hundreds of millions of consoles and stuff,
oh yeah,
you get so full of yourself.
Yeah, it sounds like PlayStation 5. That's why y'all playing remasters and remakes and looking forward to paying full price for Xbox games. Yeah, you're right about that.
Egotistical that you don't care about the product.
Yeah, you see, that's why I don't care when Xbox is at 30 million sales, because as you can clearly see, they care more about their consumers than what you got with Sony and Nintendo. That sold over 100 million.
Connection to the consumer. Look, I know these people are just here to make money. Everybody's just here to make money. But at the end of the day, you can still care. You know that you could build up more trust, more love, more dedication if you're providing something that other people...
Well, all I say is don't support it. But, look what y'all did. Y'all pre-ordered it. The pre-orders are already taken. That's what y'all did, man. As far as I'm concerned, the gaming community is done. Nobody cares. Physical media is dead. We're in a digital-only future, and this is all y'all fault. All of you guys have incorporated. And I'm telling you, man, as time goes on, Game Pass Ultimate is just going to look more and more appealing throughout the years. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, man. And like I said, I don't get all this hate towards Nintendo. I get the hate towards Nintendo. I just don't understand as to why PlayStation fans are doing it, considering that they did the same thing on PlayStation 5. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. And like I said, take care. Peace out.